Hey guys, welcome to Foster Change, where we talk about all things life, parenting, and child welfare related. Today I have with me two awesome dads, and we're going to talk about foster dadding.
Yep.
We are.
Foster dadding. All right, so do you guys want to jump in and introduce yourselves, share a little bit about your connection to the foster care system, that bit of your journey?
Yep, so I'll start. I'm Justin. I'm married to Lauren, and our foster journey, started 3 years before it actually started. So I dragged my feet for 3 years into this journey. That was a big part of it, is how we overcame that. And then, our journey ended getting one child, a second one a few months later, as foster children, and we eventually adopted them. So now we're a family of 7 with 5 kids.
Yeah. My name is Josh. You'll find out that our families are very connected. But my wife, Andrea, and I really had a dream in our heart when we were dating and actually were talking about foster care to one day be foster parents. And so we waited for a long time and eventually bought our first house and decided okay, this is the time where we're going to start that foster care journey. So we got licensed, and what we thought was just going to be us being foster parents actually turned into an opportunity for permanency, so fostering to adopt. And we have 2 biological kids and 2 adopted kids now. So we're a family of 6, and it's just been really, really cool being a person of faith. I've just seen God's faithfulness and His hand all over this situation. There were a lot of obstacles. I'm sure you guys remember that.
Yeah.
I remember y'all's journey and just being there and watching it, going, "Oh my gosh, this is really, really amazing." And I think that's some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today is just maybe some of those insecurities and those questions that you have about can I really do this?
Right.
And I personally think because of some priorities that my wife and I really stood on, that helped us be able to make really firm decisions in how we did things. We say a lot, we go back to our why all the time.
Yeah.
Why do we do this? And I know you've encouraged us in that. Always go back to your why. And so I think that's some of the stuff that we're going to talk about. That's a little bit of our journey.
Yeah. So I know you touched on it. You got a house, you established some roots. How did you know that this was something that you were ready to do? At what point did you say, all right, I know you were reluctant. You already mentioned that. I was there. I lived through it. What did I do or say or not say? Or what was it that pushed you over the edge to say, all right, we're going to do this?
So the kind of final thing was we had a belief that we should help kids. And there was kids in our local community that needed help. And that was the thing that pushed me personally over the edge. I mean, there was a lot of things setting it up, is our family stable? Is our situation stable? Do we have all these boxes checked off? But at the end of the day, it was there's kids in our own backyard that needed help. That's what pushed me over the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for us is similar, definitely similar. But I think the priority for us, me and my wife, has always been hey, are we good? I think if your marriage is good, you're able to tackle a lot more things. And so we had 8 years to really work on ourselves. And we've been through some challenges in our marriage. I've been through some personal challenges. I've dealt with anxiety and depression and had to really make sure that that I was healed from that. And it's not that it's something that I don't still deal with, but I'm very aware of
Right.
of how that affects a family. It affected my family. My wife was super gracious in that period. But once we planted roots, and what I mean by planted roots is our marriage was solid. Our marriage had a lot of roots, a lot of things that we could always go back to our why in our marriage. But for us, buying a house here in South Florida was a big milestone for us, and it made me feel as the provider, I am now not necessarily, because I don't think you're ever ready, right?
No.
You're not actually ever ready.
No, never.
And so, but it made me feel okay, I can give a child a safe place where they're confident. Yeah. And for us, it really was about kids need help. I remember we recorded our biological daughter reading this book, and it just said, kids are important. kids need to be safe. And actually hearing her say that was so powerful. And we actually we had talked with our kids for a couple years about, hey, this is something that like we really want to do as a family. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah.
And to hear their perspective and to hear them ask questions and like give them space to just process before we had ever even started like licensing classes and all that was really, really cool. Yeah. So I think Andrea and I were ready. We were planted somewhere and we had enough conversations with our kids to go, hey, this is going to be challenging. Like, don't think that you're just getting, a brother or a sister, or in our case, a brother and a sister, and it's just going to be the super easy thing. It wasn't that way at all.
No, it never is.
But for them, they were ready. They knew a lot of the things that we wanted them to know about foster care, and we almost like in educating ourselves, we were able to educate them in a healthy way, and so I think that's kind of why we felt like, okay, we're ready. Like we can do this. We're going to be figuring it out along the way, but at the end of the day, like it was just us walking in obedience. We knew this is something that we were called to, and so we felt like that was a good starting point, and it was a pretty incredible journey.
Yeah. So now you're parenting, now you're dadding, foster dadding, adoptive dadding. Yeah. All the dadding is happening. What is something that you would say you found joy in the journey? Because the journey we know can be challenging. Once you start the journey, it can be overwhelming. So you got your yes, you jump in and you're going to do it. How did you feel at the onset of the journey, and then what brought you joy in the journey? Because I think it's important to kind of focus on those moments that bring you joy.
So I think just getting to saying yes was a relief. I think there's all this worry about making the decision. Is it the right decision? Then once you say yes and you commit, just that is a relief. Yeah. And then, once you say yes, you get a whole new set of worries. You're like, I'm going to hit this kid or kids that I don't know. How are they going to fit in my family? Yeah. But a huge milestone was Kingston, which is our son now. He came on my birthday. And so he was really young at the time, and he instantly called me Dad, because that's what all of our kids called me. Yeah. And so that was a huge milestone, a huge just blessing. Like, okay, this kid sees me that way, and even though there's going to be a lot of hardships after that, even though you're going to have to adjust, even though there's a lot of things you don't know, he sees the foster kids in the system see you as a parent, as a father or a mother. And those are huge blessings along the way that it's so easy to take for granted when life is not going well or they're not behaving like you expect or whatever it is. Yeah. Those are huge milestones and wins that I think just, keep you going and get you through and thinking about the why. Why am I doing this? To your point earlier.
Would you say, because, okay, so we got Kingston on his birthday, and I have a huge thing with birthdays in our foster care journey, which I'm sure we will get into at later dates. See what I did there? So anyway, that being said, we got Kingston on your birthday, and then shortly thereafter, there was another question. We got another call if we would take one of his siblings, and so we had a little bit of pushback. And I remember I was making a backpack rack because I'm super organized, and I was putting knobs on the backpack rack, and I put a fifth knob on the rack, and he looked at me and he was like, "You've got to be kidding me. Are you?" He's like,
"It was for your backpack."
Yeah, I said, "This is for my purse. I don't know what you're thinking, but wait a minute, are you thinking?" And he was like, "Just call her." And I was like, "Okay." Wow. So I called, and I was like, "We're a yes." And I don't even think he was halfway in the door before he was so in love with Kyla. And to this day, she has him wrapped around her finger, but there was still a little hesitancy for like, okay, another one, but it was a much quicker process. And I think for me, seeing your joy in parenting all of them, it just further confirms that like all of the yeses were the right yeses, but they did come with a little bit of careful calculation.
Well, I would say with Kyla, when we got the call for Kyla, I was not a yes. I was like, we have 4 kids. Yeah. We signed up for 1 more. 5 is a whole nother level. Like they give you like 30 minutes to decide this, by the way. It's like a life-changing decision in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But my immediate reaction was like, no way. But then, of course, you start thinking about it. And you're like, this is his sister. Like, if I want what's best for him, how can I say no to her?
Right.
So I quickly changed. But their life, literally, if you're going into this, life-changing decisions in 30 minutes, that's why it's so important to prepare, to have roots, to talk about your why. Because without that, you get into these situations and they happen like that, and you have to be ready.
Yeah, it's kind of like a blur. Sometimes you
it
look
is.
back and you go, I don't even remember that conversation.
Right.
So you have to, I love that you mentioned roots. I think that that's so important to make sure that you remember your why. You remember why it is that you're doing what you're doing.
Sure.
So that when you're having those conversations and everything's happening so fast, you just intuitively and reflexively speak from a place of your why. That's
Right.
where like it kind of comes from and it stems from.
Yeah.
So I know we shared like what
Yeah.
in our journey, what we found joy in. Maybe it's a little different for each of us, but what brings you joy?
Yeah, I think for us, we had prepared for a long time, so I think our picture of what it would be like ended up being different, and that was okay. Right. I think what I found joy in right away was just the fact that our families are connected was just a huge it just gave me such a clearer picture of our why.
Right.
The fact that we could take our families and almost like put them together.
So
Yeah.
I think
You
we
need
should
to
probably explain this
that
a little bit. So
more.
our
Yeah.
families are like connected because our kids are actually siblings. So we got Kingston on his birthday, and then we brought Kyla into the fold, and during the time we were still fostering.
Right.
And while we were fostering these two, there was someone else that was fostering James and Nevaeh. And so they were being fostered at somewhere else, and I was close with that foster mom, and I drove everyone to all the visits, and we I got quickly attached to those kids as well. But then it came to the point where the case switched to adoption, and when the case switched to adoption, there was a choice to be made because fostering is fostering and adopting is adopting, and sometimes fostering lends itself to adopting, and other times it doesn't, and that's okay. And so this foster mom was a no on adopting, and there were many reasons for that decision being made. But for me, it was all right. What's going to come next? And it was very clear to me and very clear to Justin that this situation, we said we have a thought, and so we approached you guys, and literally everything just worked out. Like there were obstacles and it was a journey, but it really has worked out beautifully. And so I think that is
kind of where y'all came into the picture was actually right as we were asking a critical question. We got licensed. I don't know if you remember this, but we got licensed for one child. 0 to 4, I think was our age range. And so I really started questioning, did we mess something up? Because we hadn't gotten a call yet. We were like 3 months in, which does not really happen. And I was like really praying, like, did we mess something up? And so when we got that call from you, we had actually decided, hey, we're going to reevaluate and kind of rethink, is our capacity limited to one child?
Right.
And there were some physical obstacles in our way that made us think, oh, we just can't do it. But the calling outweighed the physical obstacles. And so when we became aware of y'all's kids having older siblings, we were like, wait a second.
Yeah.
This is kind of a game changer for our family, but the bigger picture was, it's important to keep siblings together, and when they're separated, their life looks totally different.
Yeah.
And so for us to be able to have an opportunity to keep a family together in proximity to their siblings, going to the same church, meeting up at the park multiple times a week, like we felt like such a responsibility to make that happen. And I remember when we met the kids, it was so cool because it was right after COVID had hit. It was over a Zoom call, and we were playing music for them. And I thought we were sending a video to them, But we end up on this Zoom call, and I'm like, oh, we're meeting them for the first time. Oh my goodness gracious, this is life-changing. And our kids meeting, I mean, we probably talked for 2 hours, just with these kids and getting to know them. And I think that was, if you want to talk about joy, it was like, I honestly was like having to choke back tears because I was like, I just knew these kids were our kids from the moment I met them.
Right.
Seeing Marshall and Ember, my biological kids, interact with James and Nevaeh was so... It just was like God was knitting them into our family right then and there.
Right.
Now, yes, challenges, of course. I mean, there were, we had to get a new vehicle. Like, we were actually blessed with a new vehicle. We had to completely renovate our house. And we just kept saying that these obstacles are an excuse, and we are not excuse people. Like, we are going to make this happen because we know that this is what we're called to. Even from the ChildNet foster care point of view, there were still there was all this stuff. God bless my wife for doing so much paperwork.
Yeah.
You guys know
the paperwork is endless.
The paperwork is endless. It feels endless, but there were a few. You talked about milestone dates. Our kids were brought into our family as foster kids on Father's Day of 2020. The previous year, in 2019, I was actually doing an interview with Kevin Enders at our church. So 1 year later, it was just like, man, the calling was so clear. The timing was just so ordained. It was really, really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the note of obstacles, I think,
there aren't any, right? No,
there's none. But
smooth sailing.
So I'm going to talk about dad obstacles, not system obstacles. So
okay.
All right.
the system creates its own obstacles. But so I said I was dragging my feet. So we had our 3 biological children. The youngest is 8, and when she was born, maybe 3 months in was when we made the decision. We were talking about it before, but we made the decision that we wanted to become foster parents. Yeah. And so, long story short, I sat down in the class for an hour, and I was like, nope, I'm not ready.
I don't even think he needed an hour, to be honest.
Okay,
I don't think it was an hour.
And
I talked about hair, and he said, I'm out.
And I walked out, got the money back, and she was like, what just happened? And from that point, it took 3 years for us before we actually got kids in our home. And I had a list of obstacles in my mind, and I still wanted to do it. It was still, she knew I wanted to do it. We had talked about it.
Yeah.
But the obstacles, just a tip, if your husband has obstacles in his mind, don't nag him about the obstacles.
I was
going to say,
so good.
what Lauren did was she knew that list, and one of the things on the list was our house isn't ready. Our house, we need 5 bedrooms. Well, sneakily, maybe a year later, we were looking for a new house, so we got a new house. I mean, so she knew those obstacles, I knew those obstacles, and we talked about them and we checked them off. She was more attuned with my obstacles than I was at that point, and she was making sure that we kept talking about them and addressing them in a productive way. So I think that's a huge tip. It might not happen in 6 months, but keep the conversation going and keep checking at those things.
That's
and
so good.
It's building your foundation, it's building your why, all those conversations, but it doesn't have to be a
I think it builds a foundation, for those conversations and that communication about, okay, what is it that's holding you back? Okay, well, one of the things is, well, with 3 kids, Eden, I thought you were gonna. God love her. She's a special child. She is loud, and we call her extra. Because she is. We tell her it's her superpower. She's extra sweet and extra loud and extra sensitive and extra everything. So she feels things deeper than I think most normal people do. Sure. And I think that's a blessing, and we're trying to channel it and use it for the good. But that being said, when she was a baby, she never stopped crying. She was colicky, but next level colicky. Okay. And so we had to navigate and work through that. And I think that was something that we I mean, if we think this is bad, what are we inviting in? What is going to happen? And we had, it was, so I did wrestle with my own things. But I think ultimately where I landed in something that we had in our conversations was, okay, we have good days with 3 kids. Yeah. We have bad days with 3 kids. We'll have good days with 4 kids, and we'll have bad days with 4 kids. And I know Andrea and I had this conversation. She's like, are you exhausted at the end of every day? And I said, yes, I'm exhausted at the end of every day. But, the good days with 5 kids are more magnified than with
Totally.
3, and the bad days are just
Right.
worse. So
Yeah.
everything is just magnified is what I've learned. But on the front end, not knowing that oh, it's just going to be magnified, it was, all right, I think we can do this. And I remember we had those conversations like, okay,
Yeah.
that was one of the concerns. And so yeah, I agree. I think making sure that you're having those conversations and that you're addressing like what ultimately at the
Yeah.
end of the day,
Yeah, that's
underneath this, you say it's a bedroom issue, but really what you're saying is, can we handle this many children? You say it's a vehicle issue, but really it's how are we
Yeah.
going to balance all the activities? And so it's
Yeah.
just kind of coming down and understanding underneath it all, what are the fears that are driving us to like put up those walls and say,
Yeah.
I don't think this is for me. And something I've heard a lot of times, and I don't know if you can speak to it from a dad perspective, is how can I parent my biological children and these kids that come from rough places? You know, they're
Yeah.
not coming for a vacation. They're not coming to get away for like a spring break trip or anything. They're coming because out of necessity, and they need that safe, safety, that
that's so
love,
good.
that nurturing.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's a different approach. So as a dad, how do you distinguish and discern what your kids need, both biological and adoptive or foster?
Well, how do you parent kids anyway? It's a hard thing. So.
Yeah. It's hard
Mac
no
and
matter
cheese.
what. Yeah.
Always mac and
Just
cheese.
So much mac and cheese. Can we have mac and cheese, please? It's my voice for my biological daughter. I think it's one of those things that, like you said, parenting is hard no matter what.
Yeah.
I actually I've said this to Andrea. I think that going through programs like Epic that teach you that it's all about being dysregulated and then regulating them, helping them
Yeah.
regulate, not forcefully regulating them. Regulate.
Yeah, yeah. It would be really nice if we could just flip the switch, like, and we're gonna regulate now.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
But going through that, I don't mean to side swipe the conversation, but like going back to this would be a joy, but also it kind of puts some fear in you. Is like learning all of the things that we learned in our foster care classes about helping a child regulate. Was really a joy for me because it was stuff that helped me right then and there before we even had our foster or adopted kids. It helped me understand the mind and the heart of a child, and really you want to get to the heart of a child.
Right.
And these kids that we're bringing into our home as foster kids, like their heart is hurting and they need somebody to listen to their heart.
Yeah.
And so I think that a fear of mine would have been like, at the time, I'm struggling to parent my own children. So why does that qualify me to bring in more children? But I think the fact is, like, nobody expects perfection from you. They just expect availability.
Right.
Like
That's so good.
like they just need you to be available.
Yeah.
And your willingness to listen to their heart. It's a lot of listening. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Like, you guys know. It's so much listening because you have to go in almost assuming like, I don't know the full picture here, right?
Right.
Like you don't,
And
you
you
just
never
don't know.
will. You never will.
There's a great book that I'm starting to read called The Body Keeps Score.
Oh, love that book.
Okay, so
love that book.
So like we just assume that the younger they are, the better off they're going to be because they won't remember stuff, and it's just not true. And I won't go into all the science and the emotional damage that can go into a child.
We will talk about that on
Yeah.
another episode, though.
That's great. And I think that's so critical. But just assuming that you don't have the full picture and listening and asking good questions and always reminding them, like, I am not going anywhere. Like, I think that's been huge. And that has helped shape my relationship with both my biological and adopted kids. Like, all of our kids know, like, mom and dad are not going anywhere. Like, we are here for you. We're going to listen. We're going to help you regulate when you're dysregulated. And there's so much science that I'm just learning behind it, but it's just attached to like their heart. And so I think that's a fear. It's just like, am I really going to be able to help them? And I think a lot of it is, it's not that simple, obviously, because they're going to freak out and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I might have to walk away for a minute because like I'm dysregulated. Like it is emotional. There is a struggle there, but like you just being there and not reacting in anger or whatever they came from. You know, it's just being that somebody who's like, I'm available. I'm going to do my absolute best. I think is huge. I think,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just emphasize 2 points I think that you were getting at is they, their parents cared about them. Their parents still care about them.
Sure.
Right? So it's
Yeah.
not about, the emotion of caring. It's about being present with them
Yeah.
and being intentional with them. I think
Right.
those are the two biggest things. If you can be present
So
and
good.
intentional, that's really all they're looking for. Like, they didn't have that before. That's probably why they're in the situation. And as a dad especially, I mean, a lot of them come from fatherless homes. Not all of them, but a good portion of them.
Yeah.
So we have a even bigger responsibility as fathers to be present and intentional.
Yeah.
And even if they're just going to be foster kids and they're eventually
Yeah.
going to go back, statistics show most likely they're going back without a dad. So this is their one experience in life with a dad.
Yeah.
So it's a huge role to fill. So just being there and making sure you're there for them is huge.
100%.
Yeah. So availability, showing up, consistency,
Yeah.
loving and listening. I love that you touched on listening. A lot of times it's not listening to words, it's listening to behaviors. Questioning like, okay, but actually what is
Yeah.
happening right now? Because I
Yeah.
see what you're doing.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure I understand it. I'm gonna recognize I don't understand it.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna question where that
Sure.
came from. So I love that. Is there anything you want to leave our listeners with? A note of encouragement, something, speak some positivity into this because it's important, it's valuable, and I admire you guys for stepping up. Of course, I love you guys anyway. Stepping up and stepping into this because I've seen in our kids, I've seen the blessing that you guys have been to them. I can't imagine a better fit for either of them in this situation. But what would you say to a dad on the fence, like wondering should I not? Am I qualified? Am I not? What would you say to them if they came to you and they said, "Hey, dude, I'm thinking about doing this." What?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say, because it's from my own experience, don't assume that your capacity is limited by physical obstacles. You're never actually ready to get married. My dad said this to me growing up. He's like, you're never gonna be ready to actually like fully ready. You can prepare and you can do all your homework, but getting married, buying a house, like the big obstacles in life, or the big, even just the big milestones in life, like you've just got to head on, just tackle it to the best of your ability. But the thing that I think Andrew and I have stood on is like there's always more in us than we think. There's always more time than we think to listen. We just have to be good stewards of the kids that have been put in our home. And I think when we let fear take control and drive the whole thing, that's not how we were meant to live.
Right.
And I think that when we actually go back to our why and remember, and that's a conversation again you have to have with your spouse. Like, you guys have both got to be on board. But dad watching this or mom watching this and wanting dad to be on board,
Yes.
I would just encourage you, keep talking. And when you do get to that point, it's not like the fear is going to necessarily go away. Like, we have children and we're still kind of like, oh man, like this is, it's intense. It's not intense, but like anything worth doing is going to take a lot of work. Marriage is work. Parenting is work. Bringing kids in that have a totally different background where you don't have the whole picture. It's work.
Yeah.
But it's so worth it because you're going to see just this wide open journey in front of you that's going to probably look intimidating.
For sure.
But it's totally worth it. I don't know how else to describe it other than it's so worth it because they're kids from hard places, and kids are important. I hear my daughter's voice right now, like, kids are important. Kids need to be safe. Like, it's so true.
Yeah.
Like they need safety. They just need that consistency in life, because you're gonna see that later in life. When we raise kids, we want them to not just be great kids, but be great adults.
Yes.
And they were almost given a disadvantage at the start, so it's our job, right now as stewards of them, to step in and go, hey, like, we're here for you every step of the way.
Right.
Yeah, I would say as long as, and you mentioned it, if your why is aligned, if you have the right why, because that would be my first question, like, why?
Yeah.
What's your?
Yeah.
Then I would just tell a story. And, if you look at Ella, our oldest, who's 12 now, and Kyla, who just turned 5 yesterday, they have a unique bond. And
Yes.
like Ella and Eden, which biologically she was the youngest, and she was the youngest before. They have a great bond. But when Kyla came in, Kingston came in, then Kyla came in, and there was all 5. It was like, this is what it took a while to adjust, but this is what our family is. And
Wow.
you know,
Yeah.
we didn't know what we were
I feel
missing.
that.
We didn't know. And so and then when you see other things, when you see your kids want to put the other ones to bed, want to read to them, want to invest into them, you realize,
Yeah.
okay,
Wow.
this
So
this is
good.
my family, this is my life, this
Yeah.
is why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, when you see, it's a really beautiful picture when
Yeah.
when you get through all the mess of the system, when you look at all the things that happen in a daily life, but
Yeah.
your family is better for it, for sure.
Yeah.
As long as you're wise aligned, I think that's the big kind of
100%.
foundational thing.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom, your experience, your journeys with us.
Yeah. Thanks for having
It's
us.
been a great
Yeah.
conversation. All right, you heard it from the dads, and we'll see you next time. Hey guys, thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our podcast. And if you'd like more information on how you can get plugged in with our mission and our vision, as well as get support services, you can check us out on the web at fosterchange.com.